This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. But the real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people.
Donald Trump speaking to cameras moments after being found guilty by a jury in New York. For the first time ever, a former U.S. president is now a convicted felon as he runs to return to the White House. Trump is guilty on all 34 counts of falsifying business records tied to the Stormy Daniels hush money cover-up. The 45th U.S. president will be sentenced on July 11th, just days before the Republican National Convention. So for more on this, I'm now joined by Cobb. He's a former special counsel to the White House in the Trump administration. He joins me now from Kiowa Island in South Carolina. Good to speak with you tonight. Thank you.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So can you help us get inside Donald Trump's head a little bit here? I mean, in the lead up to this decision by the jury, numerous times we heard Donald Trump say things that sort of I felt were predicting a guilty verdict. And I kept thinking to myself, well, what happens if this is not guilty? Like, how is that going to play out? Do you think that he was making those statements because he saw this coming?
I think his lawyers definitely saw it coming and they explained it to him. I don't think he actually necessarily believed them, as he tends to think of himself as invincible until he stumbles. But he was prepared for it, and I think his response to the jury verdict is largely one of anger. But he had practiced, I believe, and prepared for this moment, and had a canned speech that didn't deviate much from his other angry speeches at the end of every day and the beginning of every day on the way into the courthouse. The rigged trial has been a long theme. The corrupt judge has been a long theme. The witness attacks, long theme. And he'll expand that soon to, the jurors and others, and probably anybody who was in the courthouse at the time of the verdict. But I do think he was prepared for this.
That Trump response, the accusation of this being somehow rigged, the court process, and somehow blaming it on the Biden administration is what we heard from him. As a former special counsel to the White House in the Trump administration, how does that sit with you, the idea that this was rigged? Do you feel that's possible?
No. I mean, those are all lies. And Biden had nothing to do with this case. It was a state case. It was brought by a DA who ran a state race, committed to going after Trump. Wholly independent of the Justice Department and the Biden administration, and it wasn't rigged. Now, I will say that there are some infirmities in the indictment and some infirmities in the statute, and arguably some infirmities in the jury instructions that will be issues on appeal. I'm not sure they'll be dispositive in Trump's favor by any means. I think it's likely that the appeal is sustained, as most of these appeals are. But I do think that this case, once it went to a jury, given the way the indictment was drafted and the interpretation of the statute that the judge had adopted prior to trial, and the jury instructions, I think this jury followed those instructions to a T and did the job they were asked to do based on the evidence presented.
I'm always curious when you have a guilty verdict, what the conversation is like between the defendant and his lawyers, and particularly in the case of Donald Trump, I'm curious as to, he may be publicly blaming a rigged system, but what are those private discussions like with his legal team right now, do you think? Is there something that you think, or he might think, they should have done differently?
Oh, I'm sure he has a lot of second thoughts about everything that they did, and I'm sure he's angry with them at the moment as well, but I think that'll pass. I mean, these are capable lawyers with the right kind of experience to have brought this trial. Trump handicapped him to a large degree by insisting that he never had the sexual liaison with Stormy Daniels, which I don't think anybody really believes didn't occur. Now it was, say, 18 years ago, but at the same time, there's really no question, in my view, that event happened, and by denying that, Trump set the stage for the DA to get in a lot more evidence about the event and a lot more sordid detail about Trump's habits and predilections and other conduct than would have otherwise come in. So Trump didn't help his lawyers at all in this case by holding on to his previous lies, and at the same time, they did the best they could, I think, with the hand that they were dealt. They're capable people, and he should certainly keep them on the team because they're far better than many of the lawyers he surrounded himself with.
Yeah, so this is the hand that they are dealt now from the politics side of this. We got the sentencing on July 11th, and you touched on this, the idea of an appeal. How does that, I mean, I don't know what precedent there is to understand or know how it's going to play out in terms of also the campaign, but what do you see coming here?
So I can walk through this at least as to the actual milestones that we're going to see. We'll have the sentencing on July 11th, although I'm sure the defense will try to push it back a little bit. They may or may not be successful. But at the sentencing, the judge will make a decision whether or not to sentence Trump to any jail time or a period of incarceration or community service or home confinement and financial penalties. He'll rule on that. The likelihood of a jail sentence, while not high, is higher in this case than in other cases usually under this statute because of Trump's obvious contempt for this judge, for the legal system, the multiple counts of counts of violating the gag order that he was penalized for. So a jail sentence is certainly a possibility, although typically would not be likely for a first offender, almost 80, and events that were, quite dated. The sexual liaison 18 years ago, the records in question in the case 7 or 8 years ago. But as I said, he could be sentenced to jail. That sentence would be stayed, however, pending appeal. The appeal could take 18 months. If Trump wins the election, that sentence wouldn't be served until after his term in office, which would be 4 years, or until he's impeached, whichever sooner. And it's unlikely that we'll see Trump go to jail, until then. If he wins, if he loses, he'll be out for another year to 18 months while the appeals wander through the New York appellate system. And in terms of the impact on the election, I think we have to wait and see. I would hope that it would give Americans pause that they're voting for a convicted felon, but I'm not sure that they will. And this case, of course, is not nearly as serious in terms of the conduct charged and proven as his refusal to allow the peaceful transfer of power on January 6th, and his use and abuse and retention of classified documents following his time in the White House, each of which justifiably should come with a lengthy prison sentence.
Ty Cobb, thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure. Nice to be with you.